What if I told you that George Russell could change the course of Formula 1 2025 and 2026 with a single decision? What your future is between two giants who live critical moments, and that there is much more at stake than a simple contract. What is really happening between Russell, Mercedes, and Red Bull? George Russell, Mercedes' main pilot this 2025 season, is found in the epicenter of an unprecedented media and political storm within the modern Formula 1. What at first glance might seem a simple contractual dispute has climbed to become one of the most complex and decisive strategic conflicts of the immediate future of the category. His current contract expires at the end of this year, and although the results on the track are supported by 147 points in the championship, 5 podiums and a solid victory in the Canada GP, his continuity in the Brackley team hangs from an extremely thin thread. Mercedes has put an economic offer difficult to ignore: $30 million per year in an agreement of 2 seasons plus an optional third. However, this juicy figure has not been enough to convince the British. Russell, who has built a reputation for consistency, leadership and technical adaptation within still irregular cars such as W15, wants more than money. It demands long-term security. Find a 3-year contract, a duration that reflects the total confidence of the team in its project and, above all, in its role as a pillar for the new technical regulation cycle of 2026. Mercedes' refusal to give in this point is not free. Toto Wolff, team director and key figure in the internal policy of the F1, is playing its own letters. He wants to maintain contractual flexibility because there is a very real possibility that Max Verstappen abandons Red Bull in 2026. Wolff does not hide his interest in the Dutch, and his strategy goes through having a free seat to attract him as soon as that window opens. It is here that the political and calculating nature of this dispute is revealed. By offering Russell a contract 1+1, Wolff keeps the door open for a parallel negotiation with Verstappen without committing to its current long-term pilot. This approach, however, has been interpreted by Russell as a lack of commitment. In his eyes, Mercedes seems more interested in building castles in the air than in consolidating the present. And that bothers him. Moreover, it is taken into account that he was the pilot who, with patience and sustained performance, occupied the leadership vacuum that Hamilton left after his march to Ferrari. Russell does not want to repeat the story of Valtteri Bottas, who lived every season with contractual uncertainty, affecting not only his performance, but also his political position within the team. In the midst of this silent pulse, the entire paddock has begun to speculate on the possible movements of Russell. Rumors about contacts with Red Bull began to circulate when negotiations with Mercedes stagnated. Although the media talked about a hidden pact, reality is much more nuanced. Russell has not signed or reached an agreement with anyone. But the mere fact that he is willing to explore options indicates that his loyalty to Mercedes is conditioned to a solid project, not ambiguous promises. This tension has awakened alarms in Brackley, because they know that losing Russell not only means losing a fast pilot. It means losing a leader who has already demonstrated strategic maturity, valuable technical feedback, and who has held the team while restructuring in the post-Hamilton era. For now, Mercedes plays waiting. But every day that passes without an agreement, it strengthens the perception that something has broken between the parties, and that this impasse can be the prelude to an earthquake in the pilot market. Red Bull, until recently a solid and feared structure within the paddock, is going through one of the most convulsive and fragile moments in its recent history. The second act of this story revolves around the internal collapse of a team that, although it still has the most dominant pilot of the modern era, has lost control of its institutional, strategic, and sports narrative. The fall did not start with the car or the results. It started with a name: Christian Horner. His departure in July 2025 marked a breakdown that has not yet been completely digested inside Milton Keynes. Horner was not only the team director, he was the political architect of the internal stability of Red Bull, the bridge between the interests of the business conglomerate and the sports demands of his stars. For years, he knew how to contain the egos, handle the media pressure, and protect their pilots from wear. Moreover, it was he who wove many of the internal strategic relationships, including, as leaked, preliminary contacts with George Russell. His dismissal has left a void of power that no one has managed to fill with authority or coherence. Without Horner in command, the rumors that revolved around the interest in Russell were orphaned. And that is where the structure began to tremble. Strategic decisions lost firmness. The management of the second team of the team became a symbol of disorganization and despair. Liam Lawson, who was selected to replace Sergio Perez after his departure in 2024, has starred in one of the worst debuts in the history of Red Bull. With disastrous results, multiple track errors, and a lack of total adaptation to RB21, its presence went from being a brave bet to a time bomb. Red Bull acted with a brutal forcefulness. In an unprecedented movement, they degraded Lawson after only 2 major awards, reinstating Yuki Tsunoda from Racing Bulls to cover the position. This decision, although covered with technical justifications, was actually an emergency message. The team cannot afford. You need immediate results. But the problem is deeper than a pilot who fails. The car, the RB21, is not up to expectations. He suffers in slow curves, is inconsistent with tire degradation, and even more alarming, fails to put a sustained dominant rhythm on track. In this context, Max Verstappen is increasingly alone. Internally, he no longer fully trusts technical leadership. Externally, observe how Mercedes and McLaren consolidate solid projects, while Red Bull seems to decompose on multiple fronts. The pressure on him is twofold. He must save results on track while charging with the frustration of seeing how his team loses the clarity that made him champion. Rumors about his possible exit to Mercedes are not simply speculation. They are symptoms of an institutional deterioration that he could accelerate if he decides to leave the ship. Red Bull Castle not only wobbles due to lack of results, but because it can no longer hide its structural cracks. The media pressure, the internal wars between managers, the lack of technical cohesion, and the erratic treatment towards their pilots reveal a team that has lost its course. In that scenario, any conversation that involved Russell is diluted, because now Red Bull is not in a position to offer guarantees or stability to any top pilot. And the most serious is that, while trying to contain this fire, the rest of the grill already smells the blood. Formula One has entered a new stage of silent conflict. A board where decisions are not made solely in high-speed curves, but between offices, strategic contracts, and corporate maneuvers. This is the modern Cold War of the Great Circus. A struggle for power among the most influential teams in the championship, where each public word is measured, each rumor is a piece of pressure, and each silence is as eloquent as a track overtake. In the center of all this, a figure, George Russell. Not because of its past, but for what it represents in the future. The pressure involved in Russell goes beyond the sports plane. His name has become a symbol of power that is at stake between Mercedes and Red Bull. His decision to renew or leave could incline the balance of competitive balance towards a new order. And both Toto Wolff and the remaining directors of Red Bull know it. But the fascinating thing about this scenario is that both parties arrive with hidden weaknesses and opposite strategies. Mercedes, even being the team with the best organizational structure at this time, has no absolute technical guarantees. The W15 has shown advances, but it is still an inconsistent performance car. Its real strength is in its organization and future planning, with a clear approach in 2026, when new technical regulations will enter into force. Wolff wants to have maneuvering room to bring Verstappen if the Dutch decides to cut his ties with Red Bull. But if that movement does not concrete, letting Russell go to weaken its immediate pillar. It is a very high-risk commitment. On the other side, Red Bull is an injured giant. Its power structure is divided after Horner's exit, and the pressure to rebuild his domain without him is causing hasty decisions and contradictory messages. Russell's signing could have been a master play, not only because of her talent, but because she would have contributed stability to an environment in crisis. However, they no longer have political clarity or technical offer to seduce a top pilot with a long-term project, and less to one that demands guarantees and a clear vision of the future. To this is added the Verstappen factor. The world champion, who continues to deliver results with a car clearly lower than that of McLaren in certain conditions, is more exposed than ever. His statements and those of his father have been crystalline. If Red Bull cannot offer him a winning car, he will look for another team. And Mercedes, with his history of victories and his solid technical platform, is the natural destiny. If Verstappen leaves and Russell too, the balance of being able to shake completely. Formula One would lose its technical status quo, and what would come would be a brutal reconfiguration of the competitive map. In this context, Russell's silence becomes the most powerful tool. He has not closed the door to any option, and that keeps everyone in suspense. Each step of yours is analyzed by strategists, engineers, and managers. Each gesture is interpreted as a movement signal. Because in this Cold War, the British pilot not only runs against the stopwatch, run with the future of F1 in your hands. And when he finally moves file, it will be impossible for the category ecosystem to remain intact. There will be winners. There will be losers. The big question that is floating in the air is, how will the teams react? Will Mercedes dare to give ground in order to wait for Verstappen? Can Red Bull structure quickly enough to make a credible and attractive offer to a pilot like Russell? And what role will external actors play, such as McLaren, Ferrari, or even Aston Martin, who observe from the shadow? Do you think Russell must maintain his commitment to Mercedes and force them to commit in the long term? Or do you think that a change to Red Bull, however risky it seems, could open the door to a new glory cycle? What really has a stable future project? So I invite you to leave your opinion in the comments.